What's up everybody, Coach Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Valorant video, and in this video we're going to be breaking down 7 ultimates everyone is using incorrectly, and we're going to give you tips and tricks on each one so that you can start popping off with the most powerful abilities in the entire game. But go ahead over to the GameLeap website right now if you want in-depth Radiant tier VODs over every single agent in the game, brought to you by our top 100 GameLeap creator, Tanner. Go check it out in the links down below right now and learn from the best. But without further ado, let's jump into the video. Now, kicking it off with the first ultimate in the entire game that we got to break down, and it's Jett's Bladestorm. Now, Bladestorm, of course, has tons of potential to pop off, but a lot of people are still not using it correctly based on the nerfs that we got quite some time ago, and they don't even know when to use it, so let's break it all down. Now, at a base level, typically Bladestorm is an extremely good use when your team is actually on eco, because it has the potential of really stealing a gun for your ally and just comboing off out of nowhere, especially when enemies expect you to be saving and they don't expect that you have a weapon that can be lethal from max range like Bladestorm. You can catch even an AR wielder off guard, get that kill for your team, give one of your teammates a weapon, and you can actually turn an ecoed matchup. Now, of course, the other time to use it is to simply use it when the rest of your team could buy but you can't, or maybe you can afford it so you buy a weapon for your ally and you use Bladestorm as a pseudo buy in that round. Not quite as good as using it on eco, but that can still work when you're in a pinch. Now, the big nerf that I was referring to earlier is the headshot multiplier. Now on the alternate fire doesn't do 3x, it only does 2x. So if you hit that one Bladestorm in the head and nothing else with the right click, you're not going to kill an enemy that's at max shields. Now, this means that medium ranged right clicks are simply not as consistent as they were before, and typically you should be using your primary fire a lot more from anything but the closest range, especially if you already used a couple of knives. It's going to be very unlikely that you connect with 2 headshots or a headshot and a body shot if you only have a couple of knives in your weapon. Now, typically, something that you should be doing though on Bladestorm is, yes, you can go for that Hail Mary right click only if you know or you have that feeling that you are going to die otherwise. Sometimes we know when we're dead to rights. When an enemy swings us with intent, we know that we don't have very much time to win the matchup, and in those scenarios, go for the right click because it's far better than getting insta-kill before you have a chance to actually, fight back. But most of the time, just rely on that primary fire, and remember, you could be jumping, flying, and moving and still be very accurate with it. Now, moving on to the next ultimate that we got to break down in this video is none other than Killjoy's Lockdown, which is a phenomenal ultimate if you use it the correct way. The best way to use it, and the way that pros are using it, is to retake sites, where you as a team play a much more retake style, where the people that are fighting on the point, they will give it up a lot easier. They will let the enemy team take the site and plant without dying. Of course, they're going to gather that info, but they're not going to trade their life to keep site control, because you have this ultimate in your back pocket to retake later on that can be very effective because you force enemies off the site, but the spike is down that they have to come and contest you after you retake site control. Now, the most important thing about this style, however, is you have to communicate it to your team, because if you have 2 players playing on a site and the enemy team come, their instinctive goal a lot of times is to maintain as much site control as possible, fight the enemy even if it means dying, trying to get kills, so that when rotations come, you will still have a certain amount of site control left by the time you rotate. This is not the case when you're playing for a retake with Killjoy's Lockdown, so it's really important that everyone's on the same page and understands that this is the playstyle that they should be doing this round on defense. So definitely relay it to your team and make sure that it's known by all. Now, on top of that, don't ever assume that enemies have left even all the way up to like 75% through the lockdown, because some enemies will literally risk going in and trying to get kills for the potential to actually get detained. On top of this, if an enemy actually does get detained by this, remember that a lot of times allies will actually use their own teammate as bait. You're gonna go in and say, hey, this guy's detained, I saw him short. You run after him and his ally's just there ready and waiting for you and is gonna shut you down. So definitely keep that in mind. Now, the last thing that you need to be doing as Killjoy is make sure that you're pinging the areas that enemies are likely to be, and make sure that the little tiny crevices and corners at a primary level are non-existent, hopefully, if you can help it. But if they are, make sure that you're calling those areas to allies, because you don't want an enemy just barely staying out of the detain area in a place that your allies just assume was covered and they get shut down by this really sneaky guy just hiding in that little tiny crevice where he was safe. Now moving on to the third ultimate that we got for you in this video is Phoenix's Run It Back. Now Phoenix's Run It Back is useful for really two primary things: taking site control and gathering information. Now that being said, one of the biggest problems I see with Phoenix is you're just gonna trade it for a whole bunch of utility, and really using Phoenix's Run It Back later when the enemy are low on smokes and low on stalling based utility, that can be the best scenario, so your teammates can actually use it for an initiating tool. Like, yes, if the enemy smokes off your entry onto point, yes, if you're a Phoenix ultimate, you're not afraid to run in through the smoke, but for the rest of your allies, they are incredibly afraid to go in blind. And the longer that you actually wait to invest, run it back into the round, the more value it's going to be able to get for you, because it's going to be less likely to shut down, and you're literally just taking gunfights and duels with actual people, relaying that information back to your team, and potentially getting picks as well. Now, the last thing that you need to be thinking about when using Phoenix's Run It Back is you can grab things that you need. For example, you can use a Phoenix's Run It Back to grab a spike in a risky position, or grab an op that you want to and take it back for your team. Understanding that things come back with your Phoenix ult can be incredibly useful as a sort of long distance item grab, which is a very unique concept on a character, but it's something you should definitely be thinking about because it can come up and it can be incredibly valuable when you grab a gun that you need for a team or get that spike out of that risky position. Now moving on to the fourth ultimate that we need to break down, it's Reyna's Empress. And with Reyna seeing a lot more play in pro play, you're gonna see her a lot more, and if you're playing her, you gotta make sure that you're using her ultimate correctly. Now, the most important thing about Empress is even with all the benefits it gives you, you can still just get headshotted. How many times have you seen a Reyna on your team pop her Empress, turn the corner, and get instantly headshotted? That can happen all the time, and that is something that you want to avoid at all costs. Now, on top of that, this is going to increase your rate of fire, but on weapons with poor recoil control, this is not necessarily a great thing. Specifically the Vandal and the Bulldog, if you're rocking these guns, the effects or the benefits you're going to get from Empress is a lot less in the gunplay category. Now, the overall best use of Reyna's Empress is to actually use it to start a chain after a kill for a retake. You potentially want to retake a point, you get in a 1v1 with an enemy, you kill them, get that orb down, activate your Empress, grab the orb, and reposition on site. You can use it as a mobility tool to get into site, you can get that health, and you can sneak onto site at the same time. It is an incredibly powerful way to use it because you're guaranteed a certain amount of value. Otherwise, you're hoping that you can take an even fight with somebody after you use Empress to initiate, but there is a possibility that you get opt, shot in the head, shut down. So this is a way to get instant value and guaranteed value right off the bat at the start of the ability. Now moving on to the next ultimate that we gotta break down is none other than Breach's Rolling Thunder. Now, Breach's Rolling Thunder is gonna play out in a very similar way to Killjoy's ultimate in site retake. However, it is not quite as powerful as taking the control of site, but it's a lot quicker to execute, so it can catch enemies off guard in a way that Killjoy's lockdown could never. Now, overall, the best thing that you could do when using Rolling Thunder onto a site is isolate the areas or the sides that enemies could be on. Like, if there's a site, you want to typically ult the left or the right side so that your allies don't have to have their crosshair guarding both sides. You know, they can commit to holding one side, and it's a lot easier if your team can be confident that there's no enemies on one side, or if they are, they're going to be really easy kill. Now, on top of that, it is absolutely amazing in post-plant scenarios, which makes this ultimate much more versatile than an ultimate like Killjoy's Lockdown, where it's very good for retake and adopting the same retake strategies that we already talked about, but it can also be used to stop a plant and different things like that in the similar way that like Brimstone's Orbital Strike could be used. Now moving on to the next ultimate that we have for you on the list is Cypher's Neuro Theft. Now, in a similar way that you're actually playing for retake, when you're talking about the ultimates of Breach and the ultimates of Killjoy, and you talk about that right before the game even starts or the round even starts, you say, hey, I have my ultimate, I want to do this. With Cypher's Neuro Theft, you should be doing a much similar thing, and this could be very powerful when you adopt a passive play-in default playstyle. You see, if you're on attack, for example, and you just play passively, look for that pick opportunity, get that kill, and then neural theft, you can gather information right away and make a really solid game plan that turns that one kill into a really great plan, an easy point take, and then a round win from there. And that could be phenomenal, but you have to also relay this to your team and set this up prematurely. Now, keep in mind, the second that you activate your Cypher ult, you need to assume a large amount of movement, because let's say you ult the enemy team, right, and they have no one on the C side or one person, the enemy are automatically gonna put resources there because they know that that's their weakness and they know that that's where you're likely to move. This is why you want to move as quickly as possible, especially if you know that there's no enemies by you. Just use that information to take side control as quickly as possible so that the enemy can't get there and actually cut you off in the meantime. And assume that when you are casting your neural theft, if there's any enemies nearby, a lot of times they're gonna do one of two things. They're gonna run the frick away, or they're gonna push you right then and there. And a lot of times when you activate that neural theft and you're just staring at your mini map and you get swung on, you're just gonna die. So definitely keep that in mind. And unless you're 100% safe, keep in mind that an enemy could swing you right then and there. Now moving on to the last ultimate, but certainly not least ultimate that we gotta talk about in this video, it's Viper's Toxic Pit. Now the biggest mistake that Viper players are making is dying during the cast time. Stop casting this in open space. There is a window of time between the activation and an enemy being able to fire at you because they know where the middle of it is, so they can still spam at you through the smoke. So make sure that you're behind natural cover before you use it. On top of this, think about how far it will allow you to reach, because sometimes, like let's say that you're playing on split in B main, you can actually ult from default behind natural cover and it will stretch far enough to get you into a plant zone where you can plant the spike, so you can do it behind natural cover and still get that plant off. Now, yes, of course, the obvious way to use Toxic Pit is when the spike is down, you use it to control the spike, and you make sure that no enemy is there or sneaks in to steal that spike from you, but you can also just use it to control space, like holding defense on split in the mid section. Just ulting that when enemies are playing your area can prevent them from pushing that. And even if enemies just instantly rotate off, the power that this holds basically allows Viper to hold one of the most powerful positions on the entire map by herself, and you can just stay there, put 2 on A, 2 on B, and you have a very solid defensive setup with a Viper that is absolutely cutting off heaven from both the enemy teams. So very powerful thing to do, and definitely something I would highly suggest. Now, last up, and probably most important involving Viper's Toxic Pit, is please do your teammates a favor, and if they are using your Toxic Pit for cover, now that they don't take damage from it, do not play aggressive. If the enemy team are pushing onto site around the Toxic Pit, and you push out and die, and all your allies' positions get revealed, they are all gonna die as well, and they're gonna be absolutely furious with you, and realistically, you're gonna throw the entire round. So do yourself a favor, do your team a favor, make sure that you are the last to die. But if you want to master any of these agents right now, go check out our top 100 Tanners in-depth agent guides on the GameLeap courses, and of course we have in-depth map guides, advanced mechanical courses, and much more as well. Do yourself a favor, go check it out in the links down below right away. But thanks so much for coming by. I hope you learned something. That's all we got for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time.